Hello, hello, and welcome to the Women of the Future interview series. This is a project aimed at showcasing and celebrating the top female changemakers in Web3 and the Metaverse, using emerging technologies as a force for good. It's so exciting to have here today one of my very favorite people and dear friends. But before we get into it, my name is Irizarry, and today I'd love to introduce Dr. Gabrielle Pelicci, educator, entrepreneur, consultant in Web3. Gabby, please say hello to the audience. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so exciting to be part of this project and get to talk to you, one of my favorite people in Web3. I'm really happy to have such a great community of supportive and powerful women around me in this space.
Of course. And of course, congratulations on being selected as one of the top 100 women of the future. It sounds like a riddle these days. I say it's over and over. But we want to know a little bit about you. We want to know your background. We want to know what led you to Web3, right? Because it all had to start somewhere. Like, where did the rabbit hole begin?
That's a really good question. I feel like I've been in a rabbit hole for a very, very long time. Because I just see something exciting, something innovative, something inspiring, and I just dive in 100%. And I know that you're the same way once you kind of get that passion activated. And for me, Web3 got activated about a year ago or so. During the pandemic, I was doing humanitarian work. I'm trained as a holistic health practitioner and professor, and I've been doing that work for 20 years. And I took a break and I was volunteering in Guatemala, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, New Mexico. I was building houses. I was growing food. I was doing manual labor most of the day, every day, which was very satisfying, believe it or not. And then some of the projects that I was on in Guatemala, Dominican Republic, they were built on tokenomics. So they were using this other alternative form of currency to build economy, to do fundraising. There was Bitcoin ATMs on the corners and the marketplaces. And I was just like, it was such a departure from my world. My world had been health and wellness and fitness and nutrition and all this kind of, this whole other industry. And I had had some exposure to tech. I had done some consulting for tech startups in New York, and I had dabbled a little bit, but this was a very new thing for me. So I fell down the rabbit hole. I started with the podcasts and the crypto Twitter, and I took some online courses and, read some books, and I just got more and more immersed. And then when I returned from my journey about a year ago to Florida, I started offering free community calls and telling everyone what I had learned. And I was writing some blog posts about it. And I got recruited to do communications at a media company that was writing stories about crypto and blockchain. And one thing led to another, which led to another. And I ended up working full time in Web3 and meeting the women of the future. And it's just such an unexpected and interesting journey. If you had told me a year ago or 2 years ago, oh yeah, like you're going to be working in blockchain, I would have been like, what's a blockchain? But that's life, right? Life, it just kind of gives you these opportunities. And if you're a yes person like me, like I say yes to everything. So I just kept saying yes. And now here I am with you.
I love this. And I think sometimes it's all like divine timing, right? So I think back to like all the moments that led me to this space. So now when someone asks me, I'm like, well, I just was meant to be here. Like, I don't know how long I'll be here for, but I'm here now, right? And so like for me, I remember the first time I even heard about like crypto, and it was like 2018, around there, 2019. And I was just like curious. I was like, I think I saw a video online, and that was it, then I was like on Netflix watching like the documentary. And then I was like, when you're like just looking everywhere for information, and that was like kind of the beginning of the rabbit hole, and realizing there's just so much out there than the bubble of like whatever industry you belong to. And so that kind of just was happening in like the background. Like there wasn't true like community for me around me at that time. So I struggled to maybe like get more involved. And being a woman, like I personally just feel like I was like the only one, and like I couldn't have that conversation with other women around me. So just kind of did that like as a project with like my brother. And then that was it. So it's funny because then it comes back, about a year ago for me too, just like you. And I'm like, wait, this is Web3, but this was something else. I thought this was like completely something else. And then just like got curious. So there's so much, I feel like, pieces that come together, which make up truly Web3. And I often like to say, like, it's not really just say emerging tech, guys. Don't get to stop separating so much, because all it is emerging tech. And so that brings me to kind of our next question here is like, obviously there's some challenges to make this like, mass adoption to occur. Like, what are some of the challenges you've experienced in getting people to understand the true value of what this emerging technology can bring forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for sharing some of your journey. I didn't know much about your journey, even though we're friends. I feel like we didn't really have our origin story conversation. So it's fun to hear that as well. I think there's so many things I could say, but the thing that I think is the most critical is like getting it. Like, you have to get it, which I think is different from some other more tangible technologies. Like the first time someone put a smartphone in your hand, right? And you could kind of like swipe through and you could see, oh my God, I can put photos. Oh my God, I can put music. I can call my mom, right? Like, there was something about it that it didn't require a lot of conversation, right? It didn't require a lot of explanation. The user experience was so effortless, and it was just like in your palm, right? And that has been happening for the last, 20 years. Like I remember the first time I got a desktop computer, right? Like in high school, it was just like in your face, you plugged it in and you could do things. And I think there's something about blockchain and crypto and these new emerging technologies that a lot of it is more intangible, right? A lot of it is about systems and about currencies and about things that are more digital, more ephemeral. And you have to understand how they're being used in a way to create social change or create different kinds of impact or build different kinds of things. And we're not yet at the point where everyone's going to have an Oculus or everyone's going to have some kind of virtual reality bodysuit or something like that. Like, maybe we're going to get there, but I feel like that's going to be, maybe 10 or 20 years down the road, So I think it's like understanding really the change that's coming, that it is not really in our hands yet, which is, I think it's different than some of the other things that we've been exposed to over the last, 10 or 15 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like that was like my moment of realization was like the second I put on like the first Oculus headset, like, and I did it through like an experience thing. It wasn't like I was like going in there, checking it out, testing it out. No, it was like I put it on and I was doing an experience, and the sensation, the memory, couldn't, there wasn't smell, but I could feel like I could smell what I was experiencing. And I was walking through the Van Gogh experience, and it was just like, I was like, like in my mind, I didn't go straight to what are the problems that this could cause. I actually went straight to like, imagine what this could solve. Like, and it was like for memory, like just the memory sake of it, like transporting you to another place where you may feel safe or you may bring back positive memories. I just saw a lot of opportunity. I started and then through going to just, a lot of, here in Miami, obviously, this, like there's a lot of conferences, a lot of events, a lot of things. And so through going through some of those, like I would like start getting ideas, just listening to people talk. And I was like, well, what about this? Like, what if I started to capture my dreams in this, like, in this Oculus, and like I could capture the dreams, and maybe there's answers in your dreams for things you should be doing in your life. And obviously all these ideas are just flowing. And that's what got me just purely excited. So I'm hearing you, and I feel like we are more like-minded in that we find less the issues, and the issues become, the concerns for mass adoption become solutions, right? But of course, like, there's some things that have to be done, and there's some bigs that are out there that everyone is currently afraid of. Like, what if they take control, and what does that look like? And so obviously there's conversations over centralization versus decentralization. Are things going to become centralized for it to truly become interoperable and the user experience to be where it needs to be? Like, what are your thoughts on some of those conversations and where they're headed these days? We're hearing now like Web5 being used in like conversations. People are just kind of getting ahead of themselves. At some point we were saying Web 2.5 and now we're at Web 5. So I think it's like I find this to be an experimental phase, right? As this technology emerges. But I wanted your thoughts on maybe some of these controversial conversations.
Yeah, thanks for that. I love, you kept saying the word idea, and that was really kind of the summary of what I was trying to express, is that we're in an ideation phase. This is ideation, right? And I think the most critical thing about an ideation phase is having a vision. Like as women, a lot of times we get together with friends and we make a vision board and we post, the photos of like the boyfriend we want and the house we want and the shoes we want and stuff, right? Like we're visionary and we set our intentions and, we move in the direction of achieving those things and manifesting those things. And I think that's what ideation is for. I think ideation is for creating vision and setting intention and moving in the direction of the world that you want to create. And I think that's the phase that we're in. And yes, it's experimental. And yes, all of these other factors are going to come into play. But I don't think as a community, like on a small scale or even on a large scale, we've gotten a lot of clarity about what are we making? What are we making? Like, are we just making some kind of like membership NFTs with perks that you can get, points to stay in a hotel? Like, what are we making? Like, are we making new kinds of change? Like you said, putting, science into the dream world, putting tech into the dream world, into psychology, into behavioral change. Like, is that what we're looking at? Are we looking at leveraging this mostly for behavioral change? Are we looking at it for changing education? I had a call recently with a potential client who's doing like a healthcare blockchain project she wants to completely transform the healthcare system. She wants patients to own their data. She wants the doctors to be able to immediately give them that data when it's created, if they're in exams or they're in sessions. And she has like this beautiful vision, and she needs to get people invested in that vision. And I think we're not quite there yet. Like, we're not quite there with like you mentioned Web 5, like, okay, like, let's figure out Web 3 before we figure out Web 5. Like, where are we going? What are we doing? And I think, I know myself, there's been a bit of like a complacency or a laziness because there's been so much technology coming at us for the last, I don't know how long, I want to say like 10 or 15 years, where we're like consuming so much of the technology. Oh, a new app. Now we're using a new app. Oh, more content. We're consuming more content. And it's been this like, this kind of like someone else is making it and we're absorbing it and we're maybe using it and posting to it, but we're not really in the driver's seat. We're not really saying, what do we want social media to be, right? What do we want these smart devices to be? How do we want them to play a role in our lives, in the world, in our work, in our future? And now there's something inherent in Web3 and blockchain that says, what do you want it to be? What do you want it to be? And we've had these conversations in Mission Impact, right? You're doing this training, you're teaching these women, and the women are coming to the calls and they're in that curiosity and they want to, hear all the things and know all the things. And we keep turning it back to them and saying, no, what do you want to make? How do you want to leverage this? And I think that's what's unique about this. And I haven't really had that experience before in my work life. This feels really profound. It feels like a really big opportunity to do things differently if we grab hold of it and we run with it. And I see that. I see the people around me doing that. People that, like, we have a mutual friend who's a nurse who's in Web3. I don't know if you saw, she posted all these pictures. She went to Dubai. Like, she went to a Metaverse conference in Dubai. Like, I'm just like, hell yeah. Like, she wants to make a difference. And I think I'm not deflecting your question about regulations and about difficulties and I'm just saying, I think in ideation, you have to get total clarity first. And then once you have total clarity, then you address the things that need to be addressed. And I just don't think we're quite there yet.
And what I'm hearing here, there's so much to unpack with what you're saying. And what I'm hearing is just, which is great. What I'm hearing is like, I would say that Web3 is like the stage of desire, right? This desire to want to make an impact, to solve for blank, 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 right? Solve for whatever it is, because we've been going in pilot, like in this pilot mode, right? Just using the technology. You know, it's some of us, different generations have been born with the technology, experienced the technology when they came either as an immigrant to this country. It's like different forms, but you've been like exposed to it, right? Exposed to it over periods of time. And it may have felt gradual because, you know, maybe your parents didn't know how to use it, but now your parents have Facebook and now we don't use Facebook anymore, right? So it's like it over time, it just becomes kind of like second nature. So we started to think about until recently the concerns of like, how is this affecting our lives? And we're seeing, you know, things happening with Facebook and of course Meta now, and the conversations around how that is affecting the TikToks of the world and all of that. So there are some positives to all of that. It's opened jobs to people, new ways of creating income, but is it working the way that it's been going for the past few years? And I feel like this kind of pandemic created this sense of awakening. And again, that phase 3, right, which I call the desire, right? So we're in desire mode. What do we desire to do with this technology? And I think that there are no perfect answers. I kind of like this incubation phase that we seem to be in because it's like starting to spark conversation, right? Ideas. Not everything it's going to weed out. Like, you know, obviously things had to go popular for everyone to hear about Web3. And now it's like, oh, NFTs, I don't want to hear NFTs again. But it's in the technology itself that I find the value, not in the we're buying PFP projects. Like, let's look at the experiment of what that did. How many people went up and bought it, right? And I was just talking about GameStop. Like, I don't know, like everyone had bought like randomly stocks in GameStop. Like that was really different. Like that was not something that they were expecting was going to happen. And so it didn't do well for the wealthy, but it did well for those who didn't invested very little, you know? And so it went up. They did that. And so I feel like that's kind of what Web3 is. We create our own hypes, right? And so I'm curious to see where things are going. I love everything you said. It like got me thinking. That's why I wanted to share the desire, right? Because that's ultimately where we are. And now there's a lot of very cool projects that are starting to rise. I feel that are very interesting, that are solving for really great problems today. Are there any things, any projects, any companies that you're very excited about? Anything that you've heard of that you'd love to share?
I love having conversations with you. I want to say like 10,000 things. I mean, the GameStop, I read a book about the GameStop thing because I was kind of familiar with it, but I wasn't totally familiar with it. And it's just the most phenomenal thing. It's exactly that ethos of Web3. It started with that GameStop, which is like a lot of these systems, they feel like they've been imposed on us. Even the financial system is 500 years old, right? And it feels like something you're just born into and you have to do it, right? Like unless you're unbanked, there is a portion of the world that's unbanked. But for the banked, like it just feels like you have to have a bank account and a credit card and a mortgage and like all these things. And it feels like there aren't any other options. And it's been the same with like the stock market and investing, which is what the GameStop was about. It's like, that's something for people who already have the money, who already have the knowledge, who already have the, you know, and the wealthy people were betting against it. So the people who didn't have the power, they all got together and they started to flip the whole thing so that they could take some of their power back. And that's what so much of this ethos is. It's like taking your power back, you know, and realizing that you can be small and mighty. You don't have to have, you know, generational wealth or a massive corporation. You don't even have to stay in the systems anymore that you were born into. You can create new systems. So it's like very anarchist, which I'm like kind of an anarchist, even though I pretend like I'm not. So like, I just like love that there's this disruption and this, you know, this transformation. Anyways, that's the GameStop stuff. But with regards to like things I'm excited about, I went through a phase. I don't know if this happened to you, but I went through the phase where like everything looked like a shiny object. Like every conversation I was having was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. Oh my God, that's so cool. Like I went through this like honeymoon infatuation, and like everything seemed, you know, like very dreamy and stuff. And then I got to a phase where I was like, okay, but does it work? Like, is the thing that you're making, does it actually work? And are people using it? And like, what's your roadmap? And so I started to kind of move into this phase where like, I want to know like the validity of what you're doing. Like, I want to know, does it have sustainability? Does it have validity? Does it have community? Like a real community, not like a fake community. You know, I want to know, like, is it real? And so now I'm on this path of like asking different questions when I look at projects or when I meet founders, and trying to get like a behind the curtain of what's actually going on. And sometimes I get behind the curtain, the person's like, oh yeah, we don't have any money. And I'm like, what do you mean we don't have any money? Like, so I feel like I'm in this phase of like trying to find the projects that have the most integrity, that have the most, you know, potential, because that's what I think is the most powerful, is like when you have, you know, the best of what we've learned from, you know, entrepreneurship and Web2, when you take the best of that, the best of sales and marketing and operations and community building and content, right? And then you add this ideation to it, I feel like that's really where you are going to have the biggest impact, right? Which is what I get excited about, is that impact, right? And I feel like you need to have those roots and to have the aspiration both in order to be effective. So I'm in the process of figuring out like, what are the projects and things that really resonate, that have that level of integrity. And I would say I'm still in a very investigative phase with that, because you kind of have to you have to kind of peel some layers to get to that in Web3. It's even though it's a transparent blockchain, it's not always a transparent, you know, company or founder or something. And I've been in some situations, some less than ideal situations, where there wasn't integrity in the background. And so I'm still exploring that. I mean, obviously I'm partial to communities of women, right? I'm part of Web3 Equity and Mission Impact and 𝗀𝗃. I'm in the 𝗀𝗃 cohort 7, and I love BFF. Like, obviously I'm partial to female projects because I've always really had a deep desire to support anything that creates more equity and inclusion and things like that. So those are the ones that most frequently catch my eye and draw my attention and stuff. But I'm still learning and exploring and trying to get to the truth of things, so that we can create something really sustainable going forward.
Yes, I love this because I agree with you. This did happen to me. Like I have this natural tendency of like getting bored really fast when I've like feel like I understand. Like I just need to get to a level of understanding kind of the landscape, and then I'm like, okay, next. Like it's just because I like to keep myself kind of constantly on the edge, like challenged. And so this was happening. I was very excited about everything I saw in the beginning as well. Like everything was so like just curious. I was just that curious, like, wow, interesting. And like kind of collecting all of these different like use cases. And now I've slowed down and I've kind of even myself, this is different. Like I'm more extroverted. I love to be out, but I find myself in this like hermit kind of phase where I'm like in my little cave building and I'm like asking questions and I'm thinking and I'm reading and I'm like, how could this be different? And not having as many conversations and kind of just thinking through like, what is this and where can this be? Can this be beyond, you know, just hype? Can it be more? And so just analyzing things like that, and how could we truly stop talking about making a difference, but actually make a difference? And so like I'm focused on actually doing something. And how can I do that? Even if it's like I talked to one person, but I actually did something. I didn't just say I went and did it. So I think that that's to me what's the projects that stand out are the ones that are actually doing something about it or trying their best to do something. I'm not even focused on, are you making money right now? Because this is a very difficult time to make money. You know, the investors will tell you they're being very, very careful. So it's like, how can you think through, build a project that's valuable and then generate revenue from that? But gain trust first, gain trust. Don't just like promote it. It's like, I don't think that being the best marketing upfront is like the best approach, because that's not long lasting. That just may last, only a short phase. And so can you build something quality over time? So I love everything you said. And then of course you got into women, which is why we're here having this conversation with Global, Village Publishing House. Exactly. And so I have to, have the conversation with you, how can women achieve true gender equity in the crypto and Web3 space? Because we've seen the numbers. I see you do a lot of posts regarding kind of just investment overall. We know that it's below the 2%, it's in the 2%, below 3% kind of, rate of, women that actually get funding. In Florida, it's less, even less. Yeah. So imagine all over the world in other countries, we speak to women all over the world. And so it's very difficult and it's very challenging. And so that's, I think, where the real disruption needs to happen. And I think that that's ultimately the goal of this book is, hey, listen, we're just going to highlight 100 women. We can begin here, but there are more. But look at how diverse and how different they are and what their level of their skill sets are in Web3.
It's the thing that makes me the most angry. It just makes me angry. It just makes me so angry, which is why I'm always posting something snarky about it on LinkedIn or Twitter or something like that. I feel like we're not in the rooms where the decisions are being made. I don't know if that's just like an intuitive feeling or just like if it's like a legitimate feeling, but there's a song from the musical Hamilton, in the room where it happened, in the room where it happens, in the room where it happened. You know that song? And that's the song. It's just like an intuitive feeling. Like we're not in the rooms where it's happening. Like I think there are the rooms, right? There are the happy hour rooms and the conference rooms. And there are the kind of like, there's the area of inclusion and equity where it looks like we're in the room. And then I think there are rooms where other kinds of powerful decisions are being made. I'm not sure what those rooms are, if it's like mostly with VCs or if it's like lobbying the government or like, I don't know where those are, if it's like on the golf course or in the green room or something. But it seems like there are some silos or some places where we need to have a presence that we don't yet have a presence. And again, this is like, I'm just saying that this is a feeling that I have because I think you could name a lot of different initiatives and you could say, oh, well, there's this initiative and that, and there's, these strides and there's that, and there's, these VC firms saying, no, we're definitely going to give, half the money to women this year and something. But it just feels like we need to get closer to the source of where like these decisions are being, and when I say decisions being made, like, who's being funded? It's not like you could say that it was just kind of a coincidence if like only 30% of women were getting funded or 20. When you say less than 1% of women are getting funded, something's going on. Like, I'm sorry, that's like not an oversight. Like something's going on. And it's a female tendency to say like, oh, well, it must be me. I'm not confident enough. My pitch deck isn't good enough. I need coaching. I need to be more confident. Like it's such a female thing to go like, what work can I do on myself to make this problem better? And I've graduated from that. I'm fine. I know that I'm fine. I know that I'm intelligent. I know I'm confident. I know my pitch deck is fine. I've seen pitch decks from dudes that are pitching like walk your dog apps and getting, millions of dollars for how to meet other people that walk your dog. There's no doubt in my mind that I am on the same playing field in terms of like intelligence and competency and presentation and everything. Something else is going on. There's a major shift that needs to happen in either the mindset or the prejudice or the ethos or the culture of investing. There's places where we need to make inroads in the law or the government or the corporations, private industry that we're not quite there yet. There's some kind of penetration that we need to have that we don't yet have. And yet I think about it constantly. I think about it constantly. I feel like we've broken the glass ceiling in a lot of ways and we've gone up, but there's some kind of walls that we have not yet penetrated to, like, some inner sanctums, and whether that's like psychological places or physical places, gathering places. And I see some progress, but the other mistake that I think that we make, which is probably an unpopular thing to say, is we can't just hang out with each other all the time. You can't just do like 100 women at Davos and 100 women in Web3 and the women in Web3. Like, you can't just hang out with girls all the time, because girls aren't in the most important rooms. Dudes are in the most important rooms. So like, there has to be a strong connection with male allies. You've got to be in the room with other dudes. You can't just make like more and more female support organizations. Like, those are good, but that's not enough. Like, you have to have male allies. Male allies are already getting the funding and getting the, anyway, it makes me really mad.
No, I agree. I agree with everything you're saying. And we've seen tons of statistics on just women overall and their involvement in their decision making, and how often they take risks, how often they go for something because whether they believe they have the, the confidence, the imposter syndrome that occurs. Like, it's just, men are more likely to raise their hand and go for the job having no skills, where women actually will take a second, to look at it themselves and say, do I have all these things in this job description? I don't have them. You know what? I don't have 3 of them. I can't apply for this. Well, men will say, well, I have maybe half of one. Apply. And that's like a big difference too, right? So that sort of attitude it translates over year over year over year. And it's like, it's been a small evolution. I think it's a very slow evolution in which we've kind of evolved from that. So I think a behavioral change needs to occur in the things that we implement and how we accept or approach things in general. So that will take some time. And I agree. I think co-ed, having male allies, it's so necessary to have, just to even ask the questions, like, what goes on in there? Like, what do you do when you play golf? Like, what happens? What do you talk about? Like, it's like, ask all the things. Not that we need to be like them, but we need to understand, we need to understand the conversations, because it's not like it's going to change from one day to the next. But the best we could do is learn to adapt to those, situations, that we can place ourselves where we need to be. So I agree with you 100%. I mean, like, obviously we've had this conversation over and over. You and I definitely, fall under that, anger on like, what do we do? What do we need to do about this? And so here we are. But thanks again so much, Gabby, for your time. It's been such a pleasure. I'm sure everyone's going to want to connect with you. Tell us where we can find you.
It's so fun hanging out with you, and I'm going to tell everyone that it's your birthday tomorrow. I don't know when this is being posted, but happy birthday to Elizabeth. Yeah, you can find me in all the social places. Dr. Gabrielle Pelicci is my handle on Twitter and Instagram, and Dr. Gabrielle Pelicci on LinkedIn. I think it's Gabrielle Pelicci, PhD, something like that. But I'm happy to connect. Like, I'm happy to talk and share. I love, being part of this community and talking about all the things. And yeah, please reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or you just want to say hi.
Awesome. Ladies, you heard it. If you see this interview and you want to learn more and you want to connect with Gabby, please make sure you reach out to her. All right. Thanks so much. Till next time.